Previously on Hockeypocalypse, we visited post-nuclear war Canada, where pickup hockey games are played by the mutated locals in exchange for supplies.
We focused on the Edmonton Atomics, a bar league team consisting of forwards Scully and Squid, enforcer Ugly Dave, goaltender Stretch, equipment manager and backup goalie Onesie, all of which were managed by Lizzie. The Atomics have played so well against smaller opponents they elected to challenge a larger outfit from Calgary and lost. Thankfully, they managed to win during a double or nothing rematch.
However, it seems the challenge never truly ends, as now the Atomics must face a new opponent from the oil fields of Fort McMurray, a town which technically doesn't exist anymore, as it merged with another town to form a new community called Wood Buffalo. Anyway, this is Hockeypocalypse Volume 2, Line Change. How can they have a line change if there aren't any lines to actually change?
Lizzie finally manages to clean the Atomics clubhouse/bar, only for it to get torn asunder by news of an injury. It turns out that Scully took a slap shot off of his ankle while trying to block it, which in turn sent the puck all the way into the other team's net. Lizzie points out that she's not a doctor, however she does have ice to try to reduce some of the swelling. None of that really matters, though, as it turns out Scully is going to be out of action for a while, meaning that Lizzie is actually going to have to take his spot on the team.
So I guess this would be the line change the title is referring to. Even though it's not really a line change, it's a injury substitution. I mean, in hockey there are at least 4 lines of forwards and 3 lines of defensemen that rotate throughout the course of a game. But like I said, this is more of an injury substitution, so I mean, look, there's not much background information on this comic. You're gonna have to settle for a lot of hockey factoids throughout this.
It really shouldn't be too much of a worry, as a pre-mutation Lizzie was actually a highly regarded player in her own right. The next morning at practice, she starts running the team through some defensive drills, only to suddenly be interrupted by the arrival of a large individual from Fort McMurray. His name is Boss Hogg and represents the Fort McMurray Rig Pigs, so he has a challenge to the Edmonton Atomics.
Sadly, the Boss Hogg in question is not the corrupt county commissioner from the Dukes of Hazzard.
Boss, it's a raid! That's my deal!
Boss Hogg, who continuously refers to himself in the third person, has a reputation for being overly physical and dominating of other teams. Still, Scully stupidly accepts the challenge, even though he's not cleared to compete, meaning that Lizzie's going to have to switch places with him, and he'll now be manager instead. So Scully hammers out the bet with the Pig Rigs manager, which involves a lot of gas, and no, not all of it generated by Boss Hogg. Now he needs to just move on to planning out the game. Except he really doesn't have a plan at all. So Lizzie is basically pulling double duty here as she elects a purely defensive strategy, where Squid will act as the only forward, while Lizzie and Dave will rotate coverage on everyone except Boss Hogg. That just winds up getting thrown out the window, however, as the Pig Rigs arrive and Boss Hogg immediately begins wrecking shop in a Jaromir Jagr-esque fashion.
So I guess much like the real Jaromir Jagr, Boss Hogg will never truly retire.
Thankfully, Stretch is able to halt most of Boss Hogg's shots, while Lizzie is constantly checked into a snowbank. It turns out her defensive rotational strategy isn't really working, as the other players on the Pig Rigs are just standing there doing nothing, and Boss Hogg is doing everything. Upon further inspection, it appears that one of his defensemen may actually just be blind.
Yes, it seems the Pig Rigs are employing the hockey version of the Bel-Air Academy basketball offense.
What does he do?
Pass it to Will.
Bingo!
Boss Hogg eventually scores and begins obnoxiously celebrating. Lizzie tells Squid to simply just monitor the other Pig Rigs players as she and Ugly Dave focus all of their attention on Boss Hogg. Not much happens other than a few innocent bystanders are struck by pucks flying into the stands. This causes the Pig Rigs manager to begin longing for the old days of arenas with boards and plexiglass up to protect everyone, which in turn winds up striking Scully with a bit of inspiration. On the ice, things begin to go the Atomics' way as Stretch blocks a shot from Boss Hogg, and the puck winds up sliding all the way to Squid, who simply skates by the defenders and towards the goalie. Though the goalie seems to leave an open shot just over his shoulder, Squid believes this all to be a trick and shoots low, which winds up bouncing off the goalie's blocker instead. However, the rebound is enough for Squid to gather it and simply flip it by the goalie up over his shoulder like he was supposed to. With the game now being tied, Boss Hogg lashes out at the goaltender, who appears to be near death, before turning to his defensemen and explaining that just because he told them not to do anything, he didn't want them to stand around and just do nothing. It's then that another fan gets taken out by a puck flying into the stands, which sends Scully wandering off towards some old ruins. As Scully leaves the hockey area, Boss Hogg launches another shot at Stretch, which just misses him, but winds up striking Turkey Neck, the blind defenseman, in the chest. The puck winds up landing next to the head of Turkey Neck's stick, and he has just enough presence of mind to put it in the back of the net. Even though the Pigrigs just took the lead, Boss Hogg's reaction is naturally restrained. Lizzie once again re-employs the strategy of just having Squid cherry-pick the puck away the next time it flies to him while everyone else focuses on Boss Hogg. This results in the Atomics not only tying the game, but eventually taking the lead, and Squid getting a hat trick. As this plays out, Scully finally finds the remains of an old arena.
The arena in question is not Rogers Place, home of the NHL's Edmonton Oilers, but rather Claire Drake Arena, home of the Golden Bears and Pandas, the respective men's and women's programs of the University of Alberta. I'm glad I caught this at this point because it almost led to a plot hole for me, which we'll get into later.
Scully returns to the playing area as another puck flies into the stands and takes out another fan. He begins rearranging the bet with the Pigrigs manager. The players on the ice don't notice any of this as Lizzie's implementing another strategy to keep the puck away from Boss Hogg. However, the porcine sapien has had enough and just begins bowling everyone over, including the rest of his team, on his way to scoring the game-tying goal. This makes Squid point out that Lizzie might be too focused on defense and that maybe she needs to try taking a few shots for herself to help him out a little. She does, and immediately just rings the shot right off the post, which Boss Hogg then gathers and rifles by Stretch to take the lead for the Pigrigs once again. Thankfully, there's 8 minutes left in the third period, so the Atomics aren't completely out of it. Lizzie immediately gets right to work as she actually manages to win a face-off and get the puck to Ugly Dave, who rifles it past the barely functioning goaltender to level things up once more. However, as the clock begins to slowly work its way down, Scully gets more and more nervous, which allows Onesie to realize that he altered the bet. Lizzie then manages to win a second face-off and gets the puck back to Squid, and the Pigrigs goalie manages to stop it this time. However, the puck winds up sliding towards Lizzie and Boss Hogg. She manages to just barely beat the brute out for it and begins charging towards the goaltender, only for Boss Hogg to then trip her up at the last second, and before she can barrel into the goalie, she manages to slip the puck into the net. Lizzie then apologizes to the goaltender, who feels like he deserved what he got. Still, the goal counts, and time manages to expire, meaning that the Atomics win. Boss Hogg begins lashing out at his teammates once again, the goalie in particular. However, Lizzie has had enough and begins standing up for the other team. She immediately begins yelling at Boss Hogg for thinking he could literally just cobble a barely sentient team together and do everything himself. He really needs to learn that being a one-man band isn't going to win any matches for him.
The Jerome McGinley story.
Lizzie tells Boss Hogg not to return until he can assemble a proper team and play a rematch. Everyone, including the other Pigrigs, welcome the dressing down, and the bet is settled. Later, Scully reveals that he altered the bet to drop a lot of the gasoline and instead bring in a lot more construction equipment and supplies. He takes the other Atomics back to the Claire Drake Arena and states that the way things are right now, the Atomics are a professional hockey franchise, and not just a bar league team. So maybe they need to actually start acting like one. And that includes playing in a proper rink with proper protection for the fans. This also includes starting a youth academy to teach the next generation of Atomics. To inspire the younglings, Lizzie begins regaling them with tales of the days of yore, in particular when the Edmonton Oilers dominated the hockey scene. Lizzie uses a fantasy-esque setting to regale the younglings with the stories of how Mark Messier, Wayne Gretzky, Grant Fuhr, and others began their quest to return Lord Stanley to Canada from the Isle of Great Length. Though the Oilers' first attempt to go up against the Islanders resulted in disastrous fashion, a year later they would return and eventually regain them from the evil dragon goaltender Billy Smith. R.I.P. Mike Bossy.
Well, I mean, the Oilers this year almost pulled off a miracle run and, won the Stanley Cup, so it could happen again. Hopefully. Anyway, that concludes our look at Hockeypocalypse Volume 2, Line Change. How was it? Well, on the plus side, I do like a lot of the artwork in this. It's good and fun in a very lighthearted, cartoony way, which helps balance with the humor and the inherent drama that actually does take place in a hockey game. Also, like, we get a little bit of lore building, given the idea that these are humans that mutated, and apparently this happened rather recently, as many of them still do hold memories of being human. We talked about Lizzie being a great hockey player beforehand. If I do have any complaints, is that it does get a little repetitive. There's a lot of Lizzie calling the same defensive strategy over and over again. That gets a little, really, like, come on, this is probably a time where we should be changing up. And like I said, it could be hard to keep track of things sometimes. And that plot hole I mentioned earlier, like, this is a pretty minor little nitpick, but like I said, when I saw the arena, I initially thought it was going to be Rogers Place, but then I saw the Edmonton Pandas banner and I got confused. Like I said, this probably would have been a little bit nicer if, say, throughout the book there's this little ticker line on the bottom of the page that shows up, that does little jokes, it gives little factoids throughout. You probably should have put something in there to point out the difference between the arenas, just for someone who's more of a novice like me, who obviously maybe doesn't know the inner workings of collegiate hockey in Canada. Like I said, it would have just been a little nice thing to have happen. That's all I'm saying. That being said, like, I do kind of like the direction the series is going. It's very entertaining. Overall, I am going to give Hockeypocalypse Volume 2 Line Change an A. I do think this is very enjoyable, even if you're not necessarily a hockey fan. And with that, let's see what we'll be doing next time on the Random Trade Review.
Hey guys, remember you can help support the channel at patreon.com/sleepytimeforcat productions. There you can request a trade to be put in the randomizer, aka the cardboard box. And as always, remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, and ring that notification bell.